So again, thank you for joining us, and thank you for your interest in AmeriCorps VISTA. Okay, so let's just dive in. AmeriCorps VISTA is part of the federal agency known as the Corporation for National and Community Service. Our agency is the federal agency designated to oversee all national volunteer programs in the United States. We are in all 50 U.S. states and territories, as well as the U.S. Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, and Guam. We're very proud of the programs that we have here, and when I try to describe where AmeriCorps fits in our agency, I really like to describe it that we have two major programs, AmeriCorps and Senior Corps. Each of these programs has three distinct programs. AmeriCorps VISTA is part of the AmeriCorps family, and the other two projects are AmeriCorps NCCC, which stands for National Civilian Conservation Corps, and AmeriCorps State and National. But for today's purposes, we're going to talk a little bit about AmeriCorps VISTA. All right, next slide. So what is VISTA? AmeriCorps VISTA stands for Volunteers in Service to America. We actually are one of the oldest volunteer programs in the country that predates the Corporation for National and Community Service. We were founded by President Lyndon Johnson in 1964 with the idea of sending Americans to serve for one full-time year in places around the country experiencing poverty. Some of you might be familiar with the Peace Corps, which is also, we call our sister volunteer organization, and this is a separate volunteer agency that sends Americans to over 60 countries around the world to serve in two-year terms. Well, AmeriCorps VISTA was originally created to sort of serve as a domestic version of the Peace Corps, to give you an idea. From the very beginning, we have had a strictly anti-poverty and sustainable development focus. And what sets AmeriCorps VISTA apart from a lot of other volunteer opportunities is that it's considered much more of a sort of professional, organizational-based volunteer position. And of course, it is 1 year full-time. So a lot of our VISTAs are recent college graduates, but that's not to say that the program is only available to those who recently have graduated. We'll talk a little bit about the eligibility requirements here in a minute, but keep in mind that with AmeriCorps VISTA, the minimum age is 18 and there is no upper age limit. And we do have projects in all 50 U.S. states, Puerto Rico, and the Virgin Islands, and we focus largely on projects around economic opportunity, healthy futures, education, and more. So in a few minutes here, we're going to dive into sort of the basics of how the program works, and then later in today's session, you're going to hear from recent AmeriCorps VISTA alums and what they did for their projects, for their year of service, and have a chance to ask questions that you might have about applying to VISTA, about the type of work we do in AmeriCorps VISTA, or any of the other general questions. So let's go to the next slide. So here's the problem. 2016 U.S. Census data reported that over 43 million Americans currently live in poverty. And poverty right now is defined by an income level threshold for either a single person or a family, depending on the amount of people in that family. 14.5 million of those 43 million are children. That's 19%, or nearly 1 in 5 of Americans that experience poverty are children. The other thing that I think is worth noting is the United States actually has the highest child poverty rate in the entire developed world. So the issue with persistent poverty, it is definitely concentrated in some geographic areas in the United States more than others, but recent studies that have come out from the Pew Research Center and the Brookings Foundation have actually also shown that almost more than 40% of Americans live, quote unquote, paycheck to paycheck, or are one bad event away from going into serious debt, if not poverty. So a lot of Americans are economically insecure, if not living in extreme poverty, and this is absolutely something that has persisted in our country. So where does AmeriCorps VISTA come in? We provide a really local level response to poverty, and all of it is driven by the communities where we're serving. So just a quick snapshot of AmeriCorps VISTA and our impact. Now, just keep in mind, this is data from our previous year, so we're still compiling data from last year. This is data from fiscal year 16, but on average, we have 8,000 AmeriCorps VISTA members serving in over 3,000 locations across the U.S. Actually, recently we've expanded, so it's over 4,500 locations across the U.S. And in 2016, our VISTAs collectively leveraged and trained almost 1 million community volunteers. So a big part of the VISTA project is promoting volunteerism from the community level to address poverty using an organizational development model known as asset-based community development. Our VISTAs also collectively raised $178 million from other sources, whether that was cash or in-kind donations. And I'd like to point out that statistic in particular because our federal program invests twice as much money back into the local communities than is our appropriation. And, you know, as I always tell people, I cannot think of a better use of federal dollars than a program that harnesses the ingenuity and the determination of your average American to address some of our most persistent problems and keeping resources back in the communities where we're serving. Our VISTAs often fill the gap to present, in many cases, our VISTAs fill the gap that are often present in large-scale anti-poverty programs by leveraging and fostering local buy-in. So really, what do VISTA members do in a nutshell? It's not your typical volunteer opportunity. It's a one-year commitment to serve at an organization, usually a local nonprofit, or a local government agency like a mayor's office or a local municipal or county office. And VISTA members gain really significant leadership experience. So we'll hear from a few of our folks here in a few minutes. But speaking for myself, I am currently the Director of Recruitment and Outreach for AmeriCorps VISTA, and I served as a VISTA immediately after I graduated from college about 15 years ago in western New Mexico. And a big part of my project was building economic development opportunities with the Navajo Nation in New Mexico. I always tell people I was given more responsibility than I probably deserved at the age of 22, but I was writing grants, I was overseeing and helping draft some requirements for the school board in regards to economic development and working on a number of different things. So it was really quite an amazing experience. And as I mentioned, I served in western New Mexico, which was very far from where I grew up. But with VISTA, you have the opportunity to serve anywhere in the United States. So maybe you want to live and work in another part of the country and really get involved in some of the issues at the local level. Or maybe you see what's going on in your hometown and you want to make a difference. There's an opportunity out there for just about every area of interest. And that's another great thing about AmeriCorps VISTA. You can apply to the location, the project, or the focus area of your choice. And with the AmeriCorps VISTA application process, you can apply to up to 10 different projects at a time. So we always tell folks, take a look at your areas of interest, browse all of our listings, and put yourself out there for a couple of different opportunities. And finally, with AmeriCorps VISTA, you're really helping advance local solutions to poverty and inequity, and at the same time, earning a number of really great benefits, which we'll talk about in just a minute. Among those great benefits is you can earn money for school or for student loan debt. Before we talk about the benefits, though, I just want to drill down a little bit more on our focus areas. So, as I mentioned, all of the projects that we work on, all 8,000 of them around the country, are focused on addressing poverty at the local level. But we also have different focus areas, and our biggest one is education. Now, when I say education, that can mean a lot of things. It could mean access to education, access to higher education, financial education, health education. It could mean formal education or informal education. It definitely means a lot of things. And I should also note, amongst all these different focus areas, that most VISTA projects draw from a combination of 2 or more focus areas. So you'll hear, again, from some of our VISTAs here, but a common pairing would be developing economic opportunities for veterans and military families, or promoting education and access to healthy, nutritious food, things like that. So as you can see, there's something, as I mentioned, there's probably something for everybody. in our myriad of listings that are available. But in addition to having this amazing opportunity to address poverty at the local level, there's a lot of benefits to doing a year of service with AmeriCorps VISTA. So let's walk through some of these. First is the fact that while, yes, it is a volunteer opportunity, you do receive a modest biweekly living allowance that's intended to cover your basic expenses. So that is something that I think sets VISTA apart from other long-term volunteer opportunities, is that we do try to provide a living allowance. Now, it is governed by the legislation with VISTA, but our living allowance is generally seen as living at the poverty level in the area where you're serving. So going back to that statistic about poverty, that is how our living allowance is calculated. We're also one of the only AmeriCorps programs that offer a relocation allowance. So if you move more than 50 miles from your home or from the community where you're at when you're applying to VISTA, so if you're living at college, and you decide to do a VISTA service from more than 50 miles away, you'll receive relocation travel assistance and something called a settling in allowance. So I talked about money for college. That's what we call the Siegel Education Award. Right now it's just under $6,000, and you're able to use this to pay for a range of education expenses such as student loan debt or future schooling. But the other thing that I think about AmeriCorps VISTA is, we have a lot of folks who do this and definitely want to take advantage of the Education Award, but we also have people who do VISTA at different points in their lives when they may not need or could use the Education Award. And in lieu of that, we also offer just an end-of-service cash stipend of $1,800. I should also mention, since I'm talking about the Education Award, there's currently a list of over 100 colleges and universities around the country, and this list is growing, and we'll post a link to where this is at in the chat box, in the Q&A box. But this link is all these institutions around the country that match the Siegel Education Award or offer additional scholarships and opportunities. So if you're looking to get additional education after your year of VISTA service, it's a really, really great opportunity to leverage that Education Award, and a lot of people don't know it. In addition to that, there are programs that are not your typical, what you would think of as higher education opportunity, that accepts the Education Award. An example of which is NOLS, the National Outdoor Leadership School, or some trade schools or trade programs. Okay, in addition to that, we also offer a health care benefit, which is either reimbursement for health care or health care plans. We also have dental and vision options as well. One of my favorite opportunities is something called non-competitive eligibility. Now, this is really important. AmeriCorps VISTA is the only AmeriCorps program that offers federal hiring preference, which is called non-competitive eligibility. So, if you have an interest in working in the federal government at some point in your career, you receive what's called NCE, this non-competitive eligibility, for 1 year after your year of service. The NCE benefit think of it sort of as a fast track to helping you get hired with federal agencies. I myself have used my NCE benefit immediately after my VISTA service, and I was actually hired as a technician working for the USDA's field office in the same town where my VISTA service was. So I can assure you it's an amazing benefit, and it's only available to AmeriCorps VISTA members. We also offer throughout the year virtual professional development opportunities, including webinars, as well as online courses in grant writing and volunteer management. And depending on your project, you may also have in-person training opportunities throughout the year. And finally, we have, if you are a member that has a dependent child under the age of 13, we do offer a child care subsidy. So again, this is just a small list of all the benefits. And if you do have questions, please do submit them to the Q&A, and we'll be sure to address them as we can. But I can't stress enough, AmeriCorps VISTA is more than just a traditional volunteer experience. It really, truly is a life-changing opportunity with a lot of benefits. So, the question about eligibility, who can apply? You must be at least 18 years old, but there is no upper age limit. I've met AmeriCorps VISTA members serving in their 80s. I think it's amazing, and you'll see that each project really is looking for different skills and experiences. You do have to pass our criminal background investigation. In terms of citizenship, know that AmeriCorps VISTA service is open to all U.S. citizens, U.S. nationals, lawful permanent residents, and persons legally residing in a state, otherwise known as DACA. So those are the minimum eligibility requirements. And I should also say, you know, a lot of people ask, well, do we need to have a college degree? No, technically you don't. But at least 60% of our applicants last year did have a college degree. And some projects will say, when you look to apply to a specific project, they'll say, you know, I want someone with a college degree. But then again, we also have projects that want folks that have different levels of experience and different kinds of experiences. So really, the other forms of eligibility are really varying dependent upon the project. So what is it that makes a VISTA member special, or what makes a successful VISTA member? If you're thinking about applying, you know, there's a number of different things, and I should also plug, we're going to do another webinar in a month on April 11th that's going to be breaking down the VISTA application process. So after today's webinar, if you decide, you know, this is for me, then go to our website and keep an eye out, or go to our Facebook page and keep an eye out for our next invite. And we'll be sure to let you all know, because we're going to break down the application process. But in a nutshell, you know, AmeriCorps VISTA generally, they're looking for folks who are committed to service. So any previous volunteer experience or just a passion for helping others, that's always important. And because we work with all different kinds of folks around the U.S., we want folks to be open-minded and culturally agile, being comfortable working across differences, having experience working with people different from their own, and of course, being flexible, always, always, always important. I think AmeriCorps VISTA is one of those opportunities where you're given sort of a blank slate in many cases, and your project might say, you know I want to get from A to B, but how you get there, it's really up to you. So truly, you know, being flexible, creative, and collaborative, always important. And of course, like any job, being willing to learn. Our VISTAs will tell you a little bit more about their experience, but I can attest to my own. I learned so much in my 1 year of VISTA service. It was absolutely incredible, the amount of growth and professional opportunity I was given, and just learning about myself and learning about other Americans as well. So again, all of these are qualities that we definitely look for in applicants, and there are many different ways that you can demonstrate those qualities. So again, this is just in a nutshell, sort of how to apply to VISTA, and you know what the basic eligibility requirements are. And we're really happy again to do a follow-up webinar in a month to go drill down into the specifics of the application process. But I'd like to turn it over to our volunteer panel here, and we're going to hear from 3 recent AmeriCorps VISTA alums, one of whom currently works with me on my team. We're going to start with Natalie. Natalie is going to tell us more about her VISTA service, and she serves as a food access coordinator with the Pennsylvania Campus Compact program at Susquehanna University from 2015 to 2016. So let's turn it over to Emily on the phone. And Emily, I'm going to start off with a couple of questions, and then we'll skip on to our next panelist. And after we go through our 3 panelists, we'll let folks dial in and ask questions over the phone, or they can type questions in the Q&A. So Natalie, tell us about your project. And Natalie, you might be on mute. Are you able to tell us a little bit about your project? Okay. Natalie, are you there?
Natalie, but this is the operator. I can see you're still connected.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Happy to move forward. Sorry back whenever Natalie's back.
I apologize. I am right here. Hello.
Hi, Natalie. Thank you. So apologies for that. Natalie, we understand that you served as an AmeriCorps VISTA member. You were a food access coordinator with Pennsylvania Campus Compact at Susquehanna University from 2015 to 2016. So I'll just ask you a couple questions, and then feel free to just tell us a little bit about yourself. But let's start off with your project. Tell us what you did. That sounds like a really cool title, so tell us a little bit about it.
Absolutely. So as I said, I was the food access coordinator. I worked at a university. I actually lived there, and I worked in one of their offices. I had kind of a dual responsibilities to my job. One of them was to manage our on-campus garden, and the other was to manage one of our local hot meal programs. They worked really well together. So the on-campus garden, I actually was a supervisor for a group of students that came together that were really passionate about food access. And they were the ones that recruited the volunteers to actually do the hands-on work in the garden. So we had this really beautiful property that we constantly were working on, obviously every single day, sending student volunteers and everything out there. And all the food that we harvested, we actually donated to a local hot meal program that I also worked to recruit volunteers to go staff that. So it was kind of a full service, full cycle project.
That's awesome. So Natalie, did you have an interest in food access or food security before you joined AmeriCorps VISTA? How did you end up in that particular position?
So I actually didn't know much about it. So I was a previous member of, I did a year with AmeriCorps NCCC down in Mississippi, absolutely loved it. And then I actually started working for CNCS on the federal side. Decided that I wasn't exactly where I wanted to be. I had another panelist that you'll actually hear from today, Nick, had a few other friends that had done a VISTA program, kind of plugged it to my ear thinking that it would be something I was interested in. And I found Susquehanna one, food access, and it just sounded like something that was really up my alley, and that's how I kind of switched gears and went over there instead. I was interested in possibly working in higher ed afterwards, and I knew that this was an opportunity to work on a college campus and kind of get a feel for it for a year before I decided if it was something I wanted to be more serious about.
That's awesome. So specifically, Natalie, how did your position and your project address poverty at the local level?
Absolutely. So we worked with, so prior to me getting there, obviously the Campus Compact program was a 3-year program. So I was year 3 of what our project was assigned to do. Year 1 and year 2 worked with the local community more in a way that they did lectures in town, they did classes for people that were experiencing poverty, that was experiencing food insecurity, did classes on like how to cook on a budget, those kind of things. Helped people with applying for SNAP benefits. So that was kind of year 1, year 2 of our project. And I came in and my project was more about the sustainability of keeping that all running. So we put volunteer structures in place. I worked really closely with some of our community partners to make sure that this was once my position kind of dissolved and VISTA was no longer at the university, I was the one that was responsible for putting all of these programs in place that would continue to last after I was gone. So I don't know if that really answered your question. Year 1, year 2 focused a lot more on the sort of in the community doing the classes, and year 3, I guess, my address of poverty was being able to work with our community partners and making sure that we had done everything we needed to do to ensure that our services for the food insecure people in the area would continue once my position was gone.
That's awesome. So you really underscored the sustainability model of your project. And for folks listening, you know, it's very common for a VISTA project to be in a 3 to 5 year cycle where you might be serving at the beginning of a project cycle or halfway or at the end. And so even though the position might be the same year to year, the types of duties will be very different because so much of the work we do is about, you know, building these systems and then leaving that for the community to continue to manage and create and use these as they see fit. So that's really great, Natalie. My last question for you before we turn over to Nick is, you know, you mentioned that you were interested in this particular project because you were interested in eventually working in higher education. And I noticed on your bio, it looks like you currently work in higher education. So could you tell us a little bit about how your VISTA project led you to your current role and then what you do currently in your current position?
Absolutely. And I know that mine was kind of I don't know, I'm always the curveball in a group. I had a really great situation where I had this year at Susquehanna, absolutely fell in love with my job, fell in love with the professional staff members that I had an opportunity to work with at the university. I had a bit of a turnover with my leadership at the end of my year, and my supervisor was no longer there. And I actually was offered the position to take over his position at the university because I was already there for a year. They were able to see what I could do and what I was already working with. They had a great rapport with students. It didn't end up being the right fit for me, but as I said, it was just such an incredible year, and I really got to see behind the curtain of what working in that setting like that I just something I worked for. So currently I am working at Kean University in New Jersey. I'm the coordinator for community engagement. So I schedule all of the volunteer opportunities for our students throughout the academic year, and I manage part of our federal work study program. I'm currently actually in a 12-passenger van in a parking lot at our project right now. I have some students that are in a senior living community helping them with surveys right now. So I'm currently on site with my students inside working. But yeah, it was a great opportunity, and I would say for a year of VISTA, and it is such a professional setting that if you have an idea of what you want to be, a career that you want to pursue, it's a really excellent opportunity to have a fully immersive year doing that. Maybe you'll complete your year in VISTA and you loved your service, but you're like, higher ed, maybe it's not for me. Or you could be the one like I was, that it would have, if I chose to take that job, it would have led into having a position at that university strictly because I did a year of service there.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. Well, thank you, Natalie, so much for sharing your story. And I know you're actually at work, as you mentioned, right now in a service capacity, so hopefully you'll get to stay on and answer any questions that folks may have after our panel is done. So
yeah,
thank you.
Absolutely. Of course, thank you.
All right, so we're going to move on to Nick Galiardo. All right, so Nick is also an AmeriCorps VISTA alum, also served in AmeriCorps and CCC, FEMA Corps, which you can talk about a little bit. And Nick served with the Christian Appalachian Project in Eastern Kentucky and Western Virginia from 2012 to 2013. So, Nick, why don't you tell us a little bit about your project?
Sure. As was mentioned, I worked for the Christian Appalachian Project, which is actually the largest nonprofit operating out of Appalachia. They serve a total of 15 states, and the program that I was assigned to as VISTA was part of their community development arm. It was in year 4 of a 4-year grant, a 4-year $1 million grant that they had received from the energy companies in West Virginia to help a lot of the smaller grassroots nonprofits throughout southwest West Virginia to help them with press release writing, to host training conferences for them, and just do a lot of things for them that they otherwise might not have the funding, the manpower, or the time to do themselves. And so a lot of my year was spent in the fall. So I started in late summer, and the fall, for each of those 4 years, we hosted a large annual conference in Pipestem, West Virginia, and we had about 150 or so small nonprofits that would attend that. So a good portion of the beginning of my service, I helped to line up trainers, coordinate registrations for nonprofit participants, and just scheduling all the logistics around hosting that conference. So that was most of my fall, and after that I transitioned into more of a support role for a lot of the small nonprofits, writing press releases for them if they had new programs they were launching, just getting them visibility in the newspaper and things like that. But it was kind of an interesting position to be in, too, because we were in the 4th year, the final year of that grant, and due to the economic situation at the time, that was the last year that the nonprofit was going to have the community development outreach arm. And so I was kind of part of a program that was unfortunately going to be ending. And so for a good part of my year, I also had to try and come up with some sort of sustainability mechanism to help continue to help the nonprofits that we had been helping over the course of the 4 years help them continue to do their work, even though we wouldn't necessarily be around anymore to provide those trainings and things like that. And so I worked on putting together program evaluation documentation, because a lot of funders at the time were starting to require that nonprofits provided some sort of justification for funding. So it wasn't enough for them to just show that they were doing something. A lot of funders wanted to see that the impact that was being generated from those activities, and so I put together some program evaluation guidelines and forms and things like that that would make that process easier for a lot of nonprofits otherwise wouldn't have been familiar with doing that sort of assessment stuff. And then ultimately, I rolled all that into a resource website for them too, so that once we were gone, they'd at least be able to go back and access all these resources after the fact. So it was kind of a bittersweet experience towards the end because our particular program was coming to an end, but hopefully we ended up having a sustaining impact even long after we were gone.
Oh, sure. I'm certain you did. So, Nick, it looks like you relocated to, I'm assuming, was a new part of the country for your service. Is that correct?
I did, yeah. So I grew up in Illinois in one of the Chicago suburbs, and my volunteer experience is interesting and kind of a long story. But long story short, I volunteered. I started volunteering, doing long-term service volunteering a year prior to my VISTA experience, and I wasn't ready to give that up. I enjoyed working with program participants a lot and having that sort of impact. And luckily, through my first year volunteering, I was able to meet other VISTAs and learn about their experience, and they got me looking into other volunteer opportunities, including VISTA, which I ultimately went with. But yeah, I relocated from Chicago to Kentucky, and it was a good experience. There's always going to be some sort of moving from a heavily populated urban area to a area in eastern rural Kentucky where the total population was smaller than my high school. Took a little bit of adjustment, but it was great. It was a great learning experience. Yeah. Excellent. So, Nick, tell us a little bit. So right now, you're currently, you work for Intermedics, which is a contractor for the Federal Emergency Management Agency, otherwise known as FEMA. And it sounds like, based off of your VISTA experience and what you had previously done in AmeriCorps NCCC, sounds like you're in a really great position. Why don't you tell us a little bit about how your volunteer work led you to the current position you're in? Sure, yeah. So it's always interesting to see how your life unfolds and what seemingly small changes years ago, resulted in where you're being now. But yeah, I'm definitely there. I wouldn't be in my current role unless I had my VISTA experience and other volunteer experiences for that matter. But while I was a VISTA with the Christian Appalachian Project, my VISTA leader at the time, Stephanie Gittinger, ended up going to work after her VISTA year. She ended up working for NCCC down at their Vicksburg, Mississippi campus, and she knew that I had a passion for volunteer service, and so as my VISTA year was coming to an end, she reached out to me and suggested that I take a look at the FEMA Corps program and potentially do a year as a team leader for FEMA Corps. And so I wasn't quite done volunteering. I really enjoyed it. I love the impact that we were making, so I decided to go ahead and do a year of FEMA Corps as well. And while I was doing that, we were assigned to, my team was assigned to a project at FEMA headquarters in DC, working on developing their crisis management software and training other FEMA personnel on how to use the software and other technology stuff, which ultimately led to my current job, because while we were serving, we started doing a lot of really good development work. Our project sponsor at the time saw some good potential there, and so reached out to the company that developed the software and asked if they had an opportunity to take me on as well and allow me to continue my work with FEMA. And so obviously I wouldn't have had that opportunity had I not first done VISTA, met other VISTA members who then moved on to other roles at NCCC, encouraged me to go try FEMA Corps for a year. I did FEMA Corps, got my experience in my project, and then ultimately led to my current job. So it's been good. I've been able to continue working on hopefully improving FEMA's crisis management software, which then allows them to help other people as well.
That's amazing. Well, thank you, Nick, and we really appreciate hearing your story about how you've really made a career in volunteering throughout your experience here. So thank you, and hopefully you can stay on and answer questions that folks have at the conclusion of our panel. Okay, so now to our final panelist, Ms. Khadija Carr, and I have the privilege of working with Khadija every day. She works in our office and headquarters here at AmeriCorps VISTA, and she also serves as a VISTA member in her hometown. So Khadija, tell us a little bit about your project.
Hey everyone. So I served with a project called ServiceWorks, and ServiceWorks is what is called an intermediary or a national project. So in addition to the state that I was serving, and there were also 9 other states across the country that had members doing the same work. And so that, I think, was a part of the excitement for me. But how I really got interested in AmeriCorps was from a colleague. While I was serving, sorry, we've got a little bit of noise here. Sorry about that. Yeah, so when I was in college, I heard from a mentor about AmeriCorps. And at the time, I wasn't really sure what AmeriCorps was or VISTA, to be completely honest. I had heard of Peace Corps, but I wasn't sure that, you know, I wanted exactly what I wanted. And so they recommended that I, you know, search the website, and I looked at all of the programs, and I saw one that said it was in Silver Spring, Maryland, and I was like, obviously I'll look into this. And so when I looked further, I saw that it was a project that was serving first-generation to college students, and that was a category that I fit in, and so it made sense to me that I would be able to give back in my hometown in the same way. And so what ServiceWorks was essentially was a project that leveraged volunteer service as a strategy to allow 16 to 24-year-olds to gain critical skills that would be necessary for entering the workforce as well as college. And so what we did was organize volunteers to help scholars develop service projects that would address community issues, as well as paired them with success coaches to help them get closer to their individual college or career goals, whether that be applying to jobs or preparing for an interview, or how to appropriately dress for an interview, or how to apply for FAFSA. So there were a number of different strategies to the project that I was in, and it was really exciting for me to be able to be the service project development leader, because I was able to leverage some of the contacts I already had in my hometown to further that mission.
That's amazing. You had such a personal experience. So Khadija, tell us what motivated you, well, you did tell us about what motivated you to apply to VISTA in particular, but what would you say was the biggest challenge you encountered in your VISTA year of service?
Oof. Let's see.
Let's get real.
Let's see. So my organization was Community Preservation and Development Corporation. It is a regional real estate developer. They revitalize structures that already exist and turn them into what's called affordable housing apartments. And affordable housing is just real estate jargon for some percentage below the area median income. And so what we were tasked to do is to literally meet residents where they were and to deliver these modules to them on a weekly basis. And so this, you can imagine, for a year, doing this in several different apartment complexes can be really tough to deliver the goals of the project as well as to foster the relationships necessary to make this kind of thing successful. And so I was really lucky to have 4 other VISTAs serving with me. But I would say the biggest challenge there was to build the relationships with the community members and get them interested and excited about coming every week, especially when not all of my co-VISTAs, rather, were from the area. And so it was a little bit hard for some of them to connect to the locals for that reason.
And that's another reason why we always say, you know, it's VISTA, you can go all over the country if you want, but a lot of folks, in fact, the majority of people who apply to and serve in AmeriCorps VISTA, close to between 60 and 70% actually serve within their home community or home, we'll say regionally, their home state or their hometown. And so Khadija's example is a perfect example of where you can have the benefits and the experience of serving as a VISTA member, but stay closer to home and really leverage your own personal networks and have that knowledge, that local knowledge. And in my case, as I mentioned, I worked in a tribal community, and I am not a member of that community, so I had a very different experience, and it took me quite a while to, you know, earn the trust of the community where I was serving. So while in and of itself the process of, you know, really learning and earning that trust was definitely a wonderful experience for me, it definitely changes how your VISTA service can manifest. So Khadija, we'll pivot here, and I'll ask you one last question. So you have a Bachelor's of Science in Forensic Biology, and would love to know about how your year of VISTA service and your, you know, previous educational experience led you to your current position, and tell us a little bit about what you do.
Man, so I think about halfway through my major, I realized I definitely wouldn't want to be working in a police station. And I had already been very heavily involved in the community before college and also during college. And so I definitely wanted to continue along with that service lens. And so that's what led me to apply to VISTA. And while I was a VISTA, I knew that I definitely wanted to secure a job before I finished. And so I applied to a number of jobs, both on USA Jobs and nonprofits and all these other kinds of positions. Finally, I landed myself on the VISTA job board on the VISTA campus, and I saw that they had several jobs posted, and they said that they were looking for folks with NCE, and I knew that I would be having that very soon. And so I was like, I might as well apply to some of these and hope that they'll, you know, some of these will yield some sort of fruit, right? And so I applied to several of them. I ended up hearing back from one that was at the VISTA headquarters office in DC. I ended up interviewing for it and was offered the position. And it turns out that the job was related to criminal history, and it was a very funny conversation there. The person interviewing me at the time, my previous supervisor, says, you know, most people are not familiar with this process, but fingerprinting, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, actually, I've got a degree in forensic biology. And so that turned into a very funny conversation, but also helped me understand a lot of the legal jargon that my colleague Ann and I have to look at often on our day-to-day job.
Yeah. So as Ann mentioned, she actually used her NCE benefit, or non-competitive eligibility benefit, to help her get a position with AmeriCorps VISTA, but specifically the Corporation for National and Community Service, as we are a federal agency. So, again, a really great way to sort of use some of the benefits from VISTA service in your future career. And I do love Khadija's career path of how she, has come in some ways full circle from the subject matter that she became an expert in as a result of her degree, and now she's applying that to her, with the lens of her VISTA service and helping reform and refine our criminal history check process here at AmeriCorps VISTA. So it's quite impressive. Well, I hope you had as much fun as I did listening to our panelists, and I want to open it up to questions on the phone. Now, we've been taking a lot of questions here in the chat, and it looks like most of them have been answered, but of course, if you do want to keep using the chat functions, we have other folks here who are, filling in and typing responses, but let's open it up on the phone to people who might have questions that they want to ask. And before we do that, I just want to also point out I want to just draw your attention to, we have a very short evaluation poll, and we'd love to get your feedback on this presentation and your interest if you want to become an AmeriCorps VISTA member. So you should see the poll in the panel on the right side of your screen. All right, so let's go to our operator and see if we have any questions on the phone.
As a reminder, if you'd like to ask a question at this time, please press *1 and clearly record your name for question introduction. One moment to see if we gather questions. And I'm currently showing no questions. Oh, one moment.
No questions at this time?
It looks like we have a last-minute question from Khadija. Your line is now open.
Hello.
Hi. Hey there.
Hi, my name is Khadija. I was actually a VISTA volunteer when I was in law school, and so used kind of the VISTA opportunity to serve a law firm doing legal aid work. And so now, fast forward, I've actually launched a nonprofit doing faith-based racial reconciliation work. It affects, obviously, poverty, but wanted to come on this webinar to see how, as an organization, I can solicit for AmeriVista volunteers. Is that possible? Is that an avenue? How does that work?
Yes, you definitely can. If you go to our website, which is AmeriCorps.gov/VISTA, and you'll see a little menu on the left-hand side of the screen, there's a Partner with VISTA page, and that page will give you access to all the resources, the sample application documents that you'll need to apply to be a VISTA sponsor, someone who would host VISTA members.
Okay, so I will look at that. Thank you.
Great. Excellent.
Our next question comes from Linda. Your line is now open.
Hi, Linda. Are you there?
Yes, hi. I could barely hear. I was waiting. I'm sorry. My question is, what is there? You have to wait until your year of service is completed. During that time, after that year is completed, and you're not able to apply again, how would you do that again if you like where you were and you wanted to stay there? How does that work?
Sure. So, Tina, I would say there is a good percentage of folks who do end up doing what we call a second year or an extension of service. So there's two different options, and that all depends on the conversation you would have with your supervisor directly. Okay. So some people will say, I want to extend my service for 3 months or 6 months just to finish up a project. So there's that option. But again, it's all dependent upon the conversation you have with your immediate supervisor. Or while you're serving as a VISTA, if you would like to apply to do a second year of service, that's also something that can happen. I believe it is a slightly different application process, and you would depending on if there's a break in service or not, would depend on what sort of paperwork you'd have to fill out, but certainly that is a possibility, and people have done that. And in some cases, folks who do a year of VISTA service and really like their project, if their organization has what we call VISTA leaders, which is it's a different position. It's a little bit more of an administrative position where you're helping the organization manage a collective of VISTA volunteers, and it pays a little bit more than a traditional VISTA member. People oftentimes will apply to become a VISTA leader in their area if that opportunity is available. So absolutely you have options if you like what you're doing to continue your service.
Okay.
And since I have you on the phone, I should say that there is a maximum term limit that you can serve in AmeriCorps VISTA, and that is no more than 5 years.
Okay.
And in terms of the education award, as any AmeriCorps member, if you serve in any AmeriCorps program, you can only receive up to 2 full education awards.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Good luck.
Okay.
I noticed some folks, I'm just going to jump in here for a second before we go back to the phone. I noticed some folks had questions about part-time service or full year. So just to be clear, there's really 2 different kinds of AmeriCorps VISTA service. There's the 1-year full-time commitment, and then we have something called summer associates, and these are full-time but summer-length positions. And those can be anywhere from their service terms of 8, 9, or 10 weeks. Those usually start in May and conclude in end of July or August. So a lot of folks who are in college do what's called a summer associate term, and the education award is prorated to be, for that 3-month period, but you do receive a living allowance. The difference is with summer associates, you do not receive a relocation allowance. So those are all options that are out there, and just want to let folks know that those do exist. In terms of working or going to school part-time while you serve as a VISTA member, according to our policy, you are able to work part-time or go to school part-time contingent upon your supervisor's approval. I haven't actually heard of someone going to school full-time and serving as a VISTA full-time because, truthfully, VISTA is definitely a 40-hour-a-week, if not 45-hour-a-week job. So, but I would say if you're doing, I have known of folks doing school part-time while serving in VISTA, yes. Okay, so any other questions on the phone?
I have no additional questions at this time.
Okay, I'll start answering some questions that I think are pretty general for the entire audience. And one of them is, I noticed that you need recommendations. How do you need and what is the recommendation process like? So I'll just explain the VISTA application process sort of in a nutshell here. When you do go to our website and browse opportunities, and I'm going to type that in the chat box right now, the direct link. And I'll just go through this. And again, we're going to go into much greater detail at our next webinar, so definitely stay connected with us. But if you go to my.americorps.gov, that website, and you actually go down to the bottom of the page and do search, you should be able to look for opportunities in all AmeriCorps programs, but specifically in AmeriCorps VISTA. And what you do is you actually browse through that catalog, and there's right now like 3,000 or 4,000 opportunities currently accepting applications. And then once you see some things that you like, you actually start what's called a profile in our system, and you fill in all this basic information like your employment history, your community service history, where you went to school, all these other things. And then it's going to ask you to upload a resume, which we definitely encourage you to do. And then you'll have to do what's called a motivation statement. And that's a short, one-page essay on why you're interested in serving in AmeriCorps VISTA. And then it'll ask for 2 to 3 references. And we definitely recommend that there's a special reference form that you can just send directly to your references of choice. A note about references, make sure you use professional references. The types of references that aren't acceptable are friends or family or relatives. But if you, have a neighbor that you used to babysit for, so you worked with them in a professional capacity, that generally could be considered sufficient. But we recommend previous employers, professors, or teachers who could write a recommendation for you. So again, if you would like to start browsing positions, that's my.americorps.gov, and then you scroll to the bottom and look for search, and search under AmeriCorps VISTA. You can search by state, you can search by program type, and as I said, there's really quite a number of projects out there. I saw another question that I just want to address. Someone asked if there are positions open for 2018, 2019. Right now, we have positions open, and many more. We are adding new ones every day. So the majority of projects I would say the majority of AmeriCorps VISTA programs start at some point in the summer, so between the months of June and August. But we do have programs that start year-round, and you can apply at any time. There's no application deadline. So my advice is always start browsing, take a look at what strikes your fancy, and then create your application and submit your application to the different opportunities that you like. So let's see, let's go back to the phone. Any other questions we have?
I currently have no questions at this time.
Great. So someone actually asked, on your resume, should you provide both service work and employment history on your resume? Absolutely. Another question is, what kind of work experience do you need, or what work experience do VISTA employers look for? Honestly, I would say, depending on how much work experience you have, I mean, if you're a recent college graduate, I would put everything. If you're a professional who's retiring or someone who's been in the working world for at least a decade, I definitely would just, highlight the program, the experience that might be best suited to whatever volunteer position that you're looking for. So if you're interested in working in the health sector and maybe you've worked as a business analyst for 10 years, but you also do a lot of health volunteering on the side with like the Red Cross, I would definitely mention that in your resume, for example. Great, we're getting a lot of really great questions here, so I'm just going to start reading aloud some of the questions. Are there training programs you suggest to explore prior to, such as EMT or bookkeeping or things like that? Absolutely, I mean, if you have experience with a professional training program such as EMT or first aid or bookkeeping, I mean, definitely make mention of that because, again, a lot of our projects are very interdisciplinary, and so the more opportunities that they see that you have different experiences, the better. Excellent. Well, we have a lot of really great questions still coming in, and I just want to give another quick opportunity. Anyone else on the phone have questions for us?
I'm showing one question. Our question comes from Jessica. Your line is now open.
Thank you. My question is in regards to the challenges that the VISTA volunteers experience. I know the third panelist talked about some challenges she experienced, but I want to have the other panelists have the opportunity to share that, and also what resources they use to get affordable housing during their volunteer time.
That's a wonderful question. Let's start with Natalie. Are you still with us, Natalie, and can you answer the question?
Yep, I'm still here.
Excellent.
Okay, so I guess addressing challenges. I was really, really fortunate to have a great host site, to have a really great supervisor. My project, like I said, was already in year 3, so a lot of the kinks had already been worked out. And I just naturally function as a person that when there's chaos happening, I'm more excited and more engaged. So I would say my biggest struggle, my VISTA year, was probably really kind of fell on like the social realm. So I was, let me think, I was probably 22, 23, and I was living on a college campus. I was supervising college students. I was closer in age to the college students than I was to the people that were supposed to be my coworkers, so the professional staff members that were there. So I think my biggest struggle throughout the year was kind of figuring out where I fit socially as a VISTA member in that situation, because I wasn't really a full-time staff member, but I'm not a student, and so I kind of fell in that realm of like, who am I supposed to talk to, like how am I going to just connect with people, which is really important to me. So the way that I overcame that actually was, and it's a great resource that if any of you go into service and go into VISTA, is I just connected with VISTAs that were around me. I was fortunate enough to have some people in my cohort that were placed at universities that were really close to me, and so we just made it a point to connect with each other and to spend time in person. So, and I know that a lot of people that were in that PAC program, so that were at universities, kind of had that interesting dynamic of, I fall in this age and I couldn't really connect with other people. As far as the housing question goes, again, I was super fortunate that my location offered me free housing. So I was put on in an apartment at the university, which, like I said, kind of played into who am I supposed to interact with situation. But I had a really great apartment that was completely paid for. Just walked a 2-minute walk away from the garden that I worked at and a minute walk away from the office. So housing-wise, mine was pretty much covered.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. I will say for the folks listening in, that's not always the case.
Right.
So do you want to tell us a little bit about your biggest challenges and then also your housing situation?
Sure. So I think the greatest challenge that I ended up having over the course of my VISTA year was the realization that the program that I was a part of was going to, at the end of my VISTA year, that was the end of that program as well. And so each program is going to be at a different stage of its life cycle. Some of them may continue on, others may not, but that doesn't mean that your impact ends at the end of your term. And that's something that I had to realize myself. And that offers you some different opportunities as well. It offered me the opportunity to do what my manager ended up describing as managing up, because we didn't necessarily have a lot of things moving into the long-term future. I ended up developing a lot of my own initiatives. Everybody has their own unique talents, and you have to, depending on where your particular project is at a certain time, you just need to figure out how to use your unique skills and talents to make the best out of the situation. And I think that offered me a really good opportunity to be creative and to make a lasting impression for a unique situation. Housing-wise, I was also blessed to be a VISTA for an organization that had another volunteer program, their own volunteer program, and so they had volunteer housing available. And I had an opportunity to be a part of those volunteer households. That's, like was mentioned, that's a very rare situation, though. But from my interactions with a lot of other VISTA volunteers at the time, I know that they reached out to each other, and depending on where they were living, sometimes there was an option to kind of room up with other VISTA volunteers or other volunteers in the area as well. There are lots of volunteer programs out there. A lot of people doing long-term service projects who are kind of in the same situation, trying to find affordable housing for themselves. And so I encourage you to reach out to first other VISTA volunteers, and then try and see what other volunteers might be in the area that would want to kind of get together and get in on being roommates in a single household.
Excellent. Thank you. And Jessica, I just wanted to let you know, thank you first of all for your question. And unfortunately, Khadija had to step out. She had another engagement. But, I will just speak to my own personal experience as a VISTA member. I did not have housing secured. So I had a very unusual situation where my VISTA project had found this very low-cost housing, and I ended up living in the back part of an old hotel on Route 66 in Gallup, New Mexico. I can't say it was the most glamorous living situation, but it was subsidized so that it was at least affordable on the VISTA stipend. And I mean, this all goes back to, with the housing situation, it's a common question. A lot of projects nowadays are looking for ways to try to support their members with either subsidized housing or finding group housing or things like that. So hopefully we were able to answer your question, and again, thank you for the question. Okay, do we have any final questions on the phone?
I'm showing no additional questions at this time.
Excellent. Okay, so it looks like we've addressed most of our questions. I just want to turn it over to my other colleagues who've been answering questions. Are there any big questions that we've missed or any common ones that you've been seeing that we should address over the phone?
Let's see. I think we covered them all. When do one-year full-time VISTA service opportunities begin? Like Allie mentioned, it's kind of rolling. Projects start at any time. And do you serve continually throughout the year, or are you able to serve different projects within your selected area? You serve continually with one project for the year.
Yeah.
One just came in. Is a mentor an acceptable reference, someone who has been providing professional advice? I would say that they're a good reference. Maybe pair a mentor with either a college professor or a supervisor that you've had at a job.
Excellent. Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, you guys are asking really good questions. So again, I hope everybody here, I hope you all consider applying to AmeriCorps VISTA, and keep in mind, right now, early March, where all of our summer opportunities are just starting to go up online, and they're going to continue to be added throughout the end of this month. So take a look, find something that suits you, and if you don't see something this week, I'm not joking, check back next week. Because stuff is constantly being added, and I like to say with the thousands of opportunities out there, chances are there is something for you. I have heard of some pretty incredible VISTA programs, and everybody who was participating on the call today, all of us, including myself and our moderators in the room, are all alum, and we all have unique and different experiences. But I think there's one thing we can all say and all agree on, that it was a life-changing and in some cases a life-defining experience. And so, again, thanks everyone for participating, and please follow us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter. We're at AmeriCorps VISTA. We're going to announce our next webinar, which will take place on April 11th, and we're going to have the lovely Khadija, Carr, and Ann Odie, who joined you today, both VISTA alums, both working in our office, facilitate an application workshop. So if you haven't had a chance to apply by April 11th, we're going to help you through that. Thanks to everybody who called in, and again, if you ever have any questions, you can always reach us at VISTA Outreach at cns.gov. I'm going to put that in the chat box right now. So if you have further questions, reach out to us at VISTA Outreach at cns.gov. Again, thanks for listening and tuning in, and we hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.